Now we're going to look at doing conversions between the English system and the metric system. So sometimes we'll see that dimensional analysis is very useful with going back and forth between the English system and the metric system. But sometimes we'll have to also use that decimal bumping within our metric system. So if we look at this first example, we're going from 576 kilometers to miles. Now I've put that piece from our conversion sheet on the right hand side here. And if we look, there's actually two conversions between miles and kilometers. The 1 mile is 1.61 kilometers and 1 kilometer is 0.62 miles. So for this example, I'm going to show you what happens when we use each one. I'll start out with my dimensional analysis because that English system is involved. So if the English system is involved at all, we have to use dimensional analysis. So I'm going to take that 576 kilometers and put it over 1. Now I know when I'm using my dimensional analysis, I want those like units diagonal from each other. So I'm going to put kilometers down here and miles up here. And if I use this conversion, 1 mile is 1.61 kilometers. So I'll multiply straight across to get 576 over 1.61. The kilometers cancel out, so it's miles. And then I know that fraction bar means division. So I'm going to do 576 divided by 1.61. And if I do that, it gives me this large number. I'll round it to the nearest hundredths place. So I would say that it's about 357.76 miles. Now, let's look at what happens if I do the same problem using this other conversion. So I'll still have the 576 kilometers over 1. I still want the kilometers to cancel out, so I make sure that they're diagonal from each other, and I want to end up with miles. This time I'm using that conversion. 1 kilometer is about 0.62 miles. Notice all these kind of squiggly equal signs, they mean approximately or about. They're giving us a clue that something's rounded. So when I multiply straight across here, I have 576 times that 0.62. That gives me 357.12 over 1. And I know whenever I divide by 1, I get that same answer. So it'll be 357.12 miles. So our answers are pretty close together, but they are still different depending on which conversion we use. MyLabs Plus, when you're doing your homework, your quiz, your test, is programmed to accept either one, so it doesn't matter which conversion you use. However, I recommend that you use the conversions like the ones in green here that end up giving us a 1 in the denominator, because then you don't have to deal with the division, which a lot of times will get rid of a lot of the rounding and those big long decimal numbers that people tend to make mistakes with. So let's look at this next problem where we're going from 84 feet to decameters. So if I look at what I have that involves feet in my conversions, I know that 1 foot is 0.30 meters, or that 1 meter is 3.28 feet. So there's nothing that's going to go straight from feet to decameters. So if I'm trying to figure out what's going on, I can get from feet to meters. Then I can use my skills that we learned earlier, going within the metric system, to go from meters to decameters. So I'll start out with going from feet to meters because that's the English system to the metric system. I'm going to use my dimensional analysis. So I'll start out with my 84 feet over 1. Now I know that I want feet to cancel out, so I want them to be diagonal from each other, and I want those meters to be up top. Now it doesn't matter which conversion I use, but I'm going to try to use the one that puts a 1 in the denominator if I can. So I want the conversion that involves 1 foot. So that's this top one. 1 foot is 0.30 meters. Now, my next step is going to be to go from meters to decameters. They're both in the metric system, so that's not going to use dimensional analysis. So I'm going to multiply and get my answer here. So I'll do 84 times 0.3. That gives me 25.2 meters, or 25.2 over 1, which gives me just that 25.2 meters. So I'm not done, but I got to that meter step. Now I need to go from meters to decameters. When I'm going metric to metric, remember that's when I use my decimal bumping, that acronym to help me. So I use that acronym that King Henry died Monday drinking chocolate milk. It's meters, I'm talking about length, so I want that M in the middle, not grams or liters, and I'll put an M after everything. So if I look at what's going on, I'm starting at meters, and I want to get to decameters. So that's telling me to go 1 space to the left. So I'm going to take that decimal point and bump it 1 space to the left, and I'll find that I have 2.52 decameters as my final answer. Now I'll look at one more example of this conversion between our two systems, where I'm going from 7 pints to liters. So if I look at this capacity chart, right, the one that's given to me with going back and forth between the US system, or that standard system, and the metric system, there's nothing that gets me straight from pints to liters, but I notice that I can get from quarts to liters or from gallons to liters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from pints to quarts, because that's the next biggest thing, and then go from quarts to liters. If I wanted to go from pints to quarts to gallons and then go to liters, I could, but it's an extra step and I don't want to do that extra step. So I have 7 pints over 1, and I know my pints to quarts is that dimensional analysis, so that's why I'm starting with it over 1. And I know that there's 2 pints in every 1 quart. I set my pints to be diagonal from each other. Now I'm going to go from quarts to liters. So that English system is still involved because I've got quarts there. So I'm still going to use dimensional analysis. I want the quarts to cancel out and get liters up top. So I'm going to look for the conversion that involves 1 quart. That's this top one. That 1 quart is 0.95 liters. So my quarts will cancel out. When I multiply straight across, I have 7 times 1 times 0.95 up in that numerator, which gives me 6.65. In my denominator, I have 1 times 2 times 1, which gives me 2. And then I know that fraction bar means division. So I'm going to take 6.65 and divide it by 2. That gives me 3.325 liters. And if they asked me to round somewhere, I would round appropriately.